share this with the participants. Okay, so those who are not able to join now, they can join later.
Sure.
Yeah. So guys, we have with us Deepak Nair and so for this session, and here are our the sponsors. So you can just view and check them out. Okay, and yeah. So thank you so much, Deepak, for having us, for giving your valuable time and for this session. And yeah, over to you. Okay, so
Yeah.
you can share your screen.
Glad to meet everyone here. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's visible.
Okay.
Perfect.
Right. See. All right. Okay. Hey everyone. As been said, I'm Deepak. Glad to be here. I really love hackathons. Um, just because I feel like there's no better like creative spirit I've ever seen than at hackathons, and you know, am definitely a believer of XR. So like, I really find it a privilege just to sort of give a talk and try to like help in any way possible to help sort of promote the next generation. So I hope everything I say here is something useful and something you can take away. As I always say, take it with a grain of salt. You guys are smart yourselves. So like if it doesn't resonate, that's okay. Just use it, battle with it, think through it, and then come up with your own solutions. But one of the things I sort of wanted to talk about, and the team sort of asked me to talk about is like, what does it mean to sort of like think about retention in XR? So what I'm about to teach is like lessons I sort of learned in the UGC space. For those who don't know, UGC is user generated content. So I founded the DevRels at like Roblox, co-founded, founded the DevRel at Fortnite Creative. They became UEFN. I recently worked at Meta Horizon Worlds, and all these things are really trying to, at least at the time, bring to the forefront sort of VR and XR. I'm a firm believer that like any UGC landscape is going to have some aspect of VR, XR in the future. So one of the hard things I want to talk about is like it's not always been a sort of like pretty road. So like 6 weeks ago, I think it's now, we saw the news about Rec Room. But at the height, right, they've had like over 150 million players, over 68K like cumulative play time. Like they were like one of the beacons of sort of like the VR success stories. Um, and if you're, but now you're hearing the news, right, that they're about to shut down. So if you're building an XR, that would sort of make you like at least think and stop, right? Because people thought they had the sort of the formula, especially in the beginning. And million peoples would just show up to come play. So then the question becomes like, why are they closing? Um, and I think they told us in the plain text when you look at their sort of closing letter is like they were overwhelmed with their cost, even with the number of players they had. So then that for me asks the question like, especially that I want to sort of like look at this next 25 minutes is like, I don't think it's about more users because I think Rec Room had the users. I think it's more nuanced than that. So that's the thing. That's the problem I sort of want to unpack. And the reason why I want to unpack this is I have a lot of friends in XR, and like the thing that always sort of breaks my heart is like hearing them like building amazing prototypes in XR and having a hard time finding success. So I couldn't find like a concrete number on the retention. So I saw things everywhere from leaked memos and this type of stuff to like 10 to 20%, especially in these sort of like XR or VR sort of social worlds. But the point is, I think that we can hopefully come to a conclusion like it's hard getting people to come back into these like VR social worlds. So, so I wanted to talk about like what's the actual problem, and I don't think it's that XR has a content problem because I've seen great content out there. Um, and you've seen how many sort of like polished worlds there are with massive hype in the last 2 years. So I think it's more that the reality is like those things ship. The problem is like a lot of them are like empty worlds. A lot of them, which is the bigger issue for us, right? Is like people aren't coming back to have those experiences. So that's what we're hopefully trying to solve today is not the acquisition problems because I think people will come check out these worlds, but it's more of the after. So not acquisition, but more of like retention. How do we get people to come back? So I see this as sort of like four things we can look at. I think one, we need to deconstruct the problem a little bit more. Second is we're going to look at successful ecosystems, and my background's UGC, so we're going to look at that. And four hooks we can sort of take out of that to sort of apply to XR. And then my hope is the fourth step we can sort of look at like a practical process you guys can apply today. If you're building out one of these social worlds, but I think it still applies to even like apps as well. So let's talk about XR retention and why I think it's a little different than how people perceive it. Because I think most people, that's the problem I see, they treat it with mobile retention with extra steps, and it's not. XR is its own complete thing. So the single thing I think people don't talk about is friction. So on mobile, friction is a slow drip. So if you want someone to play something on their phone, they can pull it out, easily click an app, and then they're already in. In XR, I know the people in this talk probably are really well versed in that. Like, it's a process to sort of get into an experience, right? You have to pull out your headset, you got to deal with the strap, you got to boot it, you have to go into the right app, and like all that stuff sort of like chips away at the person who's playing these experiences. So I think what that means in terms of design is like there's a high cost of entry. So which means that like XR, every session is a choice. So I want that to sink in because like with mobiles, like people take chances because it doesn't cost them as much of anything, right? And you can see even like if you look at surveys how people's brains are sort of slowly getting rewired around that dopamine hit. Whereas XR, which is what I love, each time they boot in, it's like they have to be all in. So you can't sort of rely like how phone relies on these little lightweight nudges. They've already paid a high tax to even try your experience. So you have to give them a reason to spend that tax every single time. So, and here's where it's, I think, we have to go through the darkest before you can see the dawn, right? This is where it gets even harder, right? When you look at mobile versus XR. So most of the things that help mobile, those retention mechanics, are not sort of accessible on XR, right? Like people get push notifications, so like most people's they're not holding around their headsets around them. They have like daily streaks. They have the idea of like cosmetic FOMO, which is the idea that like they're building their identity on those apps. The other thing is that which I don't love me personally is like mobile apps and games and those types of ecosystems has this infinite scroll hook, right? Which is the whole idea. These experiences are built sort of like to keep you going, keep you looking at the next thing. And so those are the things that like XR doesn't necessarily have access to. So like again, maybe someone works on those problems, which is awesome, but like that's the things we're competing against when you look at XR versus mobile. And that's stuff they've probably refined over like 15 years on the mobile side. So like for XR, I think they have to look at like teams need to look at how to reinvent those types of things from scratch. Um, and look at it through a different lens. And I think the lens they can look through is UGC platforms. So whether people realize this or not, like UGC platforms are very successful, especially in today's age, right? It's one of the few things I've seen recently that's compounds even while you sleep. So here's the flywheel, sort of that what makes up a UGC um, creator platform. Again, super simplified, so there'll probably be things missing, but this sort of gives you a gist. So, like, step one is right. What I think makes it interesting is creators ship something. Doesn't matter if it's good. They're usually like low floor tools to make a world and some aspect of an avatar. That doesn't mean everyone abides by the rules, but that's generally been the case. Step two, right? Users discover it, and like crucially, each creator sort of brings their own audience into these types of experiences. So your platform user base isn't growing by your market; it's growing by the creator's marketing. Step three is users return, but they're not returning for the platform in the beginning as much. They're returning because for the creators and their friends they made there. And a lot of them will bring their own friends. But the idea that I especially want you to drill in your head is like they're there for their friends. So often, and we'll get into this later, like I think when people like try to take on Roblox, they never think of it in this lens of like, oh, we can just build better tools. I'm like, no, you have to get their friends also to come over. So that's a different way to process that problem. But step four of this sort of flywheel, right? And this is the magic, right? Is a small percentage, and I mean this is small, right? They become creators themselves. And we'll see why that's so important. And so what I want you to realize is like that last step is the magic because when someone builds something on top of your thing, they're invested. So like every time we ship content as like creators, right? It deprecates, right? We don't want to hear that, but it get deprecates, right? But in the creator world, right? People come back to build, people keep back coming want to experience that. They will like the challenge of creating in those spaces. And that's where I think part of the difference for XR is like how do they tap into more of that type of space? So I have some examples here. On the left is ones you probably are familiar with, right? Like Roblox, they built sort of one of the biggest like creator made platforms. It was whether you agree or not, right? It had a lot of like kid safety tools and stuff like that. Fortnite, UEFN, they shifted right from just being a pure AAA game to like making it easier to make for creators to build both in creative, and then it became UEFN. And then a lot of you are familiar with VRChat, right? And like they're 100% made by users like you. On the right um, are ones that have had less success or are still looking for their success, right? And it was mostly built around marketing. They had weak creator ecosystems, especially at the beginning, and they didn't sort of like double down on that social loop. Um, and they keep making this pattern of not understanding like the essence of this is it's built by creators and for creators. And that's the loop they have to keep feeding. Sometimes it becomes more about the first party titles or second party titles, but the reality is it's about the community building and feeling like they can have presence on that platform. And presence is something I'll talk more and more as we get into the combo. So I want to like look at UGC because whether you realize it or not, the biggest games on the planet are on UGC. And I think there's a reason for that, right? And they're usually built on these UGC platforms because of like four hooks that I think XR can sort of take. The first hook is what I call identity. So this is where users like have this idea that they want to return who they're becoming, right? So like like they find some sense of identity on your experience or platform. So when they put on their headset, they're not just like having a transactional piece of content they're playing. They feel like they're part of that process and that's who they are in that world. So I think VR chat is the biggest proof on that, right? Is like people log in to be someone. Now sometimes it's them themselves or someone it's sometimes there's something that they aspire to be. But the idea is like identity is so powerful. It's like that's the reason they're coming back, not just because of this the problem you're solving, which are great, or a good experience. They're coming back because they find identity in that experience and platform. Second, which is actually the biggest for me, is social presence, right? The idea here is that like it's a destination you go because you find friends, you bring your friends. Um, Even if like you're just starting off, people are like, "Well, I can't get anyone to come to these things." I think you can still create these types of tools, right? So it's like maybe people left messages. It's persistent world states, right? The whole idea is like people are coming to these things because it's social. One of the best it's not even my analogies I've ever heard about XR is like it's funny we call it like virtual and this is more about virtual reality, right? But it feels so disconnected when we put the headset on. And I'm not saying we should get rid of the headset or whatever it becomes, whether it becomes glasses or whatever. But the idea is like we need to make sure we're filling in that gap of where we're mixing with people. And I think there's a lot of features you can look and discover around that. Next is what I call creation tools. So like it's you can see it more powerfully in like Roblox, right? But then like the same person who's playing that Roblox game as a 12-year-old might be the same 12-year-old that becomes a 16-year-old that builds $1 million game. And the idea is that like when people can build stuff into your experiences, into your apps, into your worlds, they feel like they have ownership. Like my instinct about people is they love creating. You can see it especially in the world of Legos. And the idea is that like there's something in us that loves imprinting in these types of worlds. So having that kind of like design principle where people can build into whatever you're building, I think creates more ownership. And then by other people building, they share it. Those people come, they experience it, and then ideally they also create and ship. And the fourth one, which is the hardest one, right, is economy. It's like we now live in a world where YouTube, Roblox, and all these types of ecosystems exist. So one, they're sort of expecting to be paid, but I think it also creates this atmosphere where people realize this is something I can actually spend my time in. Whether it's like a family, like why are you wasting time? Like I can make money here. I think you guys have heard that like it used to be like astronauts used to be the number one job for kids that they would tell, but now it's YouTubing. And I don't think that's by accident, right? It's like they feel that entrepreneur bug, right? So I know it's not hard. You won't necessarily have the money, but you have to look at creative ways to sort of like allow people to feel like they're benefiting by putting their value into your ecosystem, your app, or your world. So I think like one ways we can sort of do this, right, is like we can look at different tools to like borrow from even if like the platform doesn't provide it or your app doesn't provide it, right? So I think for identity, you can look at there's Ready Player Me, right? That you can build your own avatars, right? For social presence, right? Maybe they don't have a whole like community section or world that you they have built out, right? But you can use Discord, right? I think one of the reasons why Roblox and YouTube work is they were easily able to put in Discord links. Creation tools. I mean, that's we've been talking about that a lot, right? And then economy, in which I know is probably the hardest one, but there we live in a world where like things like Stripe, where you can do payments really easily, Twitch, where you can like get people paid, and Patreon. One of the funnest things I've ever done is I used to lead the egg hunts, in production and design. And what was great about that, and those are mega events on Roblox, but they shut that down because it was too hard for the company to do. But now creators do it themselves, and the way they do it is through Patreon. So they found other people that are willing to sort of like invest. So I think it's going to still be hard to do economy, but there are more ways to get involved and help people get paid. So the other thing, which I think is not obvious, is sort of building a brand around you. And this might be the most important slide for you guys in this room, but like always realize platform shifts, meaning that like platforms disappear, platforms go away, or people find something new to check out. Um, like people should be looking at GTA because I think that's going to shift a lot of audiences, right? But the thing you should take away from that is audience are portable. Um, so, like for example, bringing it back full circle, the Rec Room creators that existed in Rec Room, um, they're going to have to find a home on June 2nd, right? So the ones who were having connections with them, had the Discord servers, had them on emails list, or had a YouTube channel, right? They're going to find those places. So that's the pattern I always want you to internalize is build a brand around you as platforms shift. Because even if the ship goes down, if you're building around you, not only do the other creators can follow you, but also your like the people who follow you will follow you, right? Which sounds funny to say out loud, right? But the idea is like the new world is like you're the product. So like you're building a cool game, you could now build that on Roblox, UEFN, Steam, right? The idea is you're building that audience that are in it for you. One of my favorite comic book writers, he was interesting because like I think he's amazing, right? And he says like, "Oh, I know my audience," and so he's very firm believer that like he can just write something and then his audience will follow him, and like I think that's sort of the apex of what we're trying to do for each one of you is just have a community around you, and it starts with just your friends, but like that can balloon. And so for someone who's a brilliant writer, it's the same strategy for y'all. You're building these products around you so that people like maybe your first invention doesn't work, but they might be there for your second or third one. So I think ways to help you build an audience around is build in public. The easiest versions I've seen is like on YouTube, right? Is like you start your videos, people start following your journey. But you can take those examples. Another thing which is shouldn't be have to be said, but I'll say it is like be findable. Like if people can't find you, email you, contact you, then they're just not going to follow you. Number three, make sure you're always giving stuff away, because then that's the resource people will share and make a connection with you. And fourth is sort of the most important one: own the relationship. Right. Um, make sure you're active on Discord, talking to these people, get their addresses. Right, get them connecting with you before, like as my joke, the algorithm takes them, right? Because that's your chance to sort of start building your presence. Because I think in this world of sort of oversaturation of content, it's more of how do you break through the noise? Because you might have a cool XR prototype, but it's more about how does someone even know that it exists? So one way I think we can do this is like I built this little small silly blueprint, right? But the idea with this blueprint is sort of just give you sort of like quick ways to think about how to like think about your XR sort of projects. So sort of zooming out, like I think the day one you're trying to see if like if people are even interested, right? Um, are people saying I need to show this to someone else? And I think you have to have that hard conversation with yourself if people aren't saying that, and try something else different if that people aren't saying that. And then day 7, right? That's sort of the repercussions of that statement, right? Is their friend or creator like, are they coming back? Because if they're not by day 7, or they're not making friends, or there's someone's not returning, they're likely not going to be there day 14 or day beyond. So if that creative flywheel is not happening, it's going to be a really hard day for your project. And then day 30, do they have like a place in your sort of prototype or world where they feel like it's their corner of the world. Because the reason why people would come not just for competition, say for a competitive game, is because they believe they're building something inside their world. And then day 90, like again, it's always going to be a small thing, but like, are there people making that transition to become a creator? And that might be more platform level, but like I think that same level even happens in people's projects and worlds. So like if you don't at least have a small percentage, it's going to be so much harder to keep people coming back. So again, this is just a simple way to think about like, are people making the right statements? Are people returning? Are people creating? And then are they making that journey to become a creator? And I think if XR sort of adopts that sort of same mindsets and platforms and worlds, I think they could have more success and sort of build these things that we see um, in really big demand on mobile. So if you can only track like I know Pete, this has been a lot. If you can only remember one thing, right? Um, track the percent of users who create something in the first 7 days. So not sessions, not like these words we're hooked on, right? Now playtime minutes, if someone's creating, because there's nothing more powerful. And you guys are all creators. Obviously, you want to do a hackathon and design hackathon if you want, but just how you are, if someone's creating something in 7 days, I think that's your golden metric. And I think that's what separate you from others. So I always like to give sort of like sorry, um things to read because I love reading. So like here's a thing of like places to check out, books to read, or people to follow. And the idea is like use these as signals, read their insights. They usually have good things about like how to work in these type of atmospheres because usually the problem is not with your prototypes, it's like understanding how you break through to the noise. And I think these are great resources. So my one little tagline is build the tools, not the experience. Um, I think that will get people coming back and help with retention of XR. But I wanted to definitely leave time for you guys to ask any questions if there are any. But I'm looking forward to looking at your projects at the end of the hackathon. Thank you.
Great, Deepak, and yeah, it was a like wonderful session. And I have a question, like a question. So
Yeah.
like as our hackathon is based on redefining the real world problems, so like how we can solve the problems in XR. Okay, so like as you have seen, like you are like you are talking about the metaverse kind of thing which users can create, right? But like in education, how this can done, like if the how the users can actually create their content so that others can do, like others can view that. So if you got my question, how we can actually use that, like the how we can use the users to create content in the VR, okay, for the education purpose. That is what I was asking.
Yeah. I mean, I think, let's see, I'll go back to this slide. So I think how you get them to build content, right, is you need to be thinking of projects, especially in this I still think XR is in this early phase because there's so much room to grow. It's about creating prototypes that I believe that users can build something into, right? So a small example is if you're building a VR world, right? And this is just a game example, right? Can they build another house, right, inside your world? That's an easy example, right? Let's make it more hard, right? I saw a great XR prototype for Puma, I think last year or a year before, right? Where you could customize the shoes, right? But imagine as you're customizing and that becomes something someone else can check out and it's easy to share on Discord or something else, right? You have to create those connection points. Does that make sense? So it's not just solving the problem of the product, It's how to like it express socially both inside the world and outside the world, especially if the platform doesn't provide that. And for XR, because people haven't been building that XR sort of like ecosystem that's connected, I have seen friends who are working that kind of problem, which is awesome. You have to find ways for that to get out. So like my biggest problem in the beginning of UGC is like a lot of the cool stuff that happens in sort of UGC ecosystems doesn't make it through the news, right? But people would post on Twitter, people would like show YouTube videos with let's plays. I think more of that needs to sort of like find its way outside. And I think you as a creator are finding ways to provide tools inside your projects and sort of how it gets expressed outside. Does that sort of explain it? I'll
Yeah,
try to
yeah,
give two
like
examples.
quite a lot. Okay, so my last question is like as we are solving the real problems, like I was like still going back to my first question that like as we are working on like creator platforms where not just by entertainment but actually solving the real problems, for example education or healthcare. So I want to like get your views on the like how to approach the problem. Yeah,
Yeah. How do you I think that's the approaching with education or healthcare is like so much of I think education's a little better, so I'll pick the harder problem, right? Healthcare. My wife's a nurse practitioner, right? Um, I think the same principles get applied, right? Is like how do you make it easy for the people using the tools to express these four verticals, right? So the things I never see for her, right, is like identity. It's just a tool. And the more you can connect her identity, the better. Social presence, right? Her social presence is telling me in person how cool this like um she this is about AI, right? But she used to be anti AI, but then she used it. It was like helping her track all the stuff with her patients, recording conversations, right? It became something that she wanted to share with someone, which was me, right? But I think the idea would be like how awesome if that could be like shared with her patient, and there was stuff you could even share even more socially that was appropriate. The creation tools, right? It's even little things like in healthcare of like how do you get her to like personalize her profile that she's part of the process, even with that tool in XR, right? Like maybe, when if you do like ZBrush and that type of art stuff, like imagine you're using that same type of tool in XR when you're doing surgery and you can create a different widget to make it easier to do the surgery. Again, making this all up, right? But are you creating that dynamic? And then so it's like, oh, so and so is the creator of this and this tool and this work XR situation. And the economy is like, I think that's still self-explanatory. Is like just make them part of the process, the nurses and doctors, so they feel like they have ownership into those things. Because that's how things get spread, right? Because the beauty for me of XR is like it does amazing things. Is this word of mouth is not spreading to get overcome that friction. So like this is where my thesis is like every time someone has to like take on that tax. And I think these are four things. If you think through that problem more holistically, people will share it more and it will spread more and get people to come back because they're like, well, if I use this tool more, I could make a tool myself. I know
yeah,
these are abstract, but like, I think that's how deep we have to take this problem. And then hopefully people will see this and then also create platforms to make all of this stuff easier.
yeah, yeah. So I think that was it. And yeah, if you have guys, if you have any questions, you can put it in the Discord, so we can later on ask with Deepak and we can get back to you. Okay. So yeah, thank you so much, Deepak, for giving us your valuable time. It was like
Yeah.
wonderful session for this wonderful session. And yeah, looking forward to you guys what you built and submit your project. The deadline is for just around 3 days, so just go for it. And we have already got around 20 of submissions already, so just go and submit your project. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to seeing all the projects.
Great. Okay, Deepak, have a nice day. Bye.
Bye, y'all.